Hi. There's some handouts. Good evening and welcome to the Co-Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist. I'm Ulrike McGregor and I'm delighted to see everyone here tonight in person, and we welcome everyone on the live stream for our fifth session of our reflections on Lent and the events of Easter through art. And once again, please remember to use the microphone when we discuss the artworks, so everyone in the chapel can hear you, and also everyone on the live stream can hear your questions and comments. And we have a little change tonight. Diane will help us. Amelia isn't with us. This week we will reflect on Christ's flagellation, accompanying him alongside many others on his way to Calvary, and be witnesses to his lonely death on the cross. You want to sit over there? It's easier to see. This slide once again helps us to visualize when our works of art were created and into which artistic time period they fall. Our first work of art is an unusual object. It is a sculpture carved out of ivory. This ivory sculpture depicts the flagellation of Christ. It was created circa 1640 by Jacobus Agnesius, an elusive artist from the 17th century. Our second work of art is a painting with the title The Procession to Calvary by Peter Bruegel the Elder from 1564. It continues the Netherlandish pictorial tradition whereby the carrying of the cross is portrayed as a many-figured procession leading from Jerusalem to Golgotha. And our last work for the evening is The Crucified Christ. It is by Flemish Baroque artist Peter Paul Rubens. The date of its creation is unknown, but probably within the first 20 years of the 17th century. Since our first work of art is a sculpture carved out of ivory, I would like to begin today's reflection with a brief overview of the materials used for the creation of sculptures, with a particular focus on ivory. Sculpture is a three-dimensional form of art created by shaping materials such as stone, ivory, bone, wood, metal, or clay. Is one of the oldest art forms. Sculptures date back to the Stone Age, which lasted circa 3 million years and ended between 4000 and 2000 BC. There are two distinct types of sculpture. One, sculpture in the round, which is a freestanding, not attached to any surface except possibly to the base. And two, relief sculpture, which is at least partially attached to a background surface. Unlike painting, which traditionally creates an illusion of three-dimensional space on a flat surface, sculpture inhabits the same space as the viewer. It is also tactile. One can touch it and feel its textures and forms. Viewing sculptures is a dynamic experience, as the works changes depending on the views and which position or which angle you're looking at the work. One of the most prevalent materials in the history of sculpture is stone, a versatile and durable material that has allowed structural and architectural fragments to endure through history. Early humans created utilitarian objects adorned with sculptural forms, as well as small animals and human figures, possibly for spiritual and religious purposes. The earliest known stone sculpture, the Venus of Willendorf, dates back more than 30,000 years. Marble is a form of granular limestone and dolomite that has been chemically recrystallized over time under the influence of great natural heat and pressure. Marble became especially prominent during the Greek and Roman periods and saw a renewed revival during the Renaissance, with artists such as Michelangelo mastering its use. Classical marble sculpture were typically painted, and that's something we have kind of misunderstood. They were painted in bright colors, however, these colors faded during weathering over time. So now, these days, we all see these white marble sculptures and we admire them for their whiteness, but during the Roman times, they were often brightly painted. That paint has gone away. In this particular example, however, the sculpture actually used colored marble. So it's a rosso, it's a red marble that were used also to make marble sculptures. Wood was also a popular material amongst ancient peoples, but its tendency to decay through adverse conditions and insect infestations means that very few wooden sculptures from before the 11th century currently survive. And then bronze was another significant medium, often used for large-scale sculptures in ancient times. However, many classical bronze sculptures were melted down for practical and economic purposes after the fall of Rome in 476 AD, leaving only a few surviving examples today. And I will most likely expand on this a little bit more because our very last work of art next week will be our Mary in Waiting, and that's a bronze sculpture. So I will expand on bronze sculptures a little bit more. Ivory was a particular prized material for sculpture. Derived primarily from elephant tusks, ivory was valued for its beauty, durability, and suitability for carving. The tusks of African elephant have always been the most highly prized, followed by those of the Indian elephant. In Europe, the walrus is the only native source of ivory. Whalebone and the teeth and bones of hippopotamus were also used as a lesser expensive substitute for ivory during the Middle Ages. Deer antlers and horn from goats and cattle were also worked to look like ivory. Throughout history, ivory has been carved into relief sculptures, small statues, and decorated objects such as manuscript covers and religious artifacts. Ivory carving was practiced in numerous civilizations, including those, as I mentioned, in Egypt, Greece, Rome, Russia, Japan, China, and India. During the early medieval period, 5th century onwards, ivory was imported to Europe from Africa and the East via Egypt, Syria, and Cyprus. The trade of ivory has been heavily restricted since 1989 by the Convention of International Trade of Endangered Species. And some countries now even have banned the import of ivory objects produced before the restrictions were enacted. And here we see the oldest known ivory carvings dating back to 33,000 to 38,000 years ago. And they were found in the Vogelherd cave in Baden-Württemberg in Germany. And I have to say, I didn't know that. The oldest pieces of ivory carving were just down the road from where I grew up. And on this slide, we can see an ivory horse and a mammoth. And they are roughly 1.5 inches in size, so they were really small objects. In the same region in Germany, the Lion Man sculpture was found as well. And in addition to its age, the size of this particular sculpture is remarkable. It's almost a foot tall. So for that's remarkable too, that's still around and that they even carve these larger objects. Ancient Egyptians, so circa from 5,500 to 700 BC, and Greeks, circa from 500 to 100 BC, continued the tradition of ivory carving, while Romans, 100 BC through 300 AD, produced personal plaques and diptychs, such as the diptych of Consul Arbidenius. And they were beautifully carved and with great detail. Early Christian sculptors adapted these ivory panels into devotional items, with the Bible providing rich iconographic inspiration, as seen in the Brescia basket. And this was produced somewhere in the 4th century. And again, I mean, this is 8 by, so it's a smaller object. During the Gothic period, ivory carving flourished, particularly in the Ile-de-France region around Paris. From the mid-13th century, sacred objects were produced in large numbers by craftsmen in small workshops. Unlike earlier medieval times, when monks created such works in monasteries. However, the production of ivory carvings in Paris declined in the late 14th century due to the disruption caused by the 100 Years' War and shifting artistic preferences towards painting. Renaissance sculptors, 1400 to 1600, brought new level of sophistication to ivory carving, focusing on small-scale religious images. However, demand remained low due to greater availability and lower cost of wood, which became the leading medium of small sculptures, particularly north of the Alps. A brief revival of ivory carving occurred in Germany and Flanders during the Baroque period of the 17th century, but it declined once again in the 18th and 19th century and has remained a small area of artistic activity ever since. And with this brief overview, I would like now to begin our reflections on our 3 works of art of this evening. Our first work of art tonight, which is our 100th work of art we are exploring in this art series, is an ivory sculpture depicting the flagellation of Christ. It was created by Jacobus Agnesius, circa 1640. And as I introduce the artist, you can follow along on the handout. The limited information available about the sculptor Agnesius is from a sales catalog entry published in Sotheby's London in December 2016. And in that, they're referring to a publication by Dr. Ike Smith, because there's not much known. And just to point this out before, so this object was actually sold at Sotheby's London in 2016 for a price of £965,000. By 2011, Dr. Schmidt had identified 8 ivory figures or groups, with additional carvings having come to light by 2016, that are either signed by the artist or bear the distinctive handling of Agnesius. These works led to the conclusion that Agnesius was active during the 2nd quarter of the 17th century in Calvi, a town on the small Mediterranean island of Corsica, At that time, Corsica was part of the Republic of Genoa, Italy. And interestingly, Napoleon was born in Calvi in 1769. Corsica, the island, became part of France in 1789. Ignatius is believed to have focused on carving religious objects out of ivory, with Saint Sebastian a favorite subject of the artist and his patrons. There are 6 known ivory sculptures of Saint Sebastian, and then there are in the Liechtenstein collection, the Louvre Museum, the convent of St. Clara in Estella, which is in Lombardy in Italy, as well in private collections. The influence of the art of Rome on Ignatius' work is palpable, from the ancient Laocoon sculpture to the works of Michelangelo and Bernini. This indicates extended personal study of the monuments themselves by Ignatius from a sojourn in Rome before the 1630s. The large size of Ignatius' ivories sets him apart from other 17th century sculptors. Ivory was an expensive commodity, and the flagellation group must have been a major commission. Christ and the 2 soldiers are among the largest ivory figures ever made. One flagellator, with both hands raised in the air, is a notable 60 centimeters high, so 2 feet, measuring from his left foot to the hand of his left arm. Almost nothing is known of the early history of Ignatius' ivories. The present ivory is an exceptional case, as it was recorded in the Bravo de Saravia collection in Chile, close to the years when Ignatius is known to have been working in the mid of the 17th century. It has remained in the same family ever since, and may have been a direct commission to the artist. The sculpture's early appearance in South America also provides an important example of the strong links between the fortunes and collections of the old and the new worlds. And as you consider Ignatius' sculpture, I would like to quote from Matthew chapter 27, verse 26. So Pilate released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, Pilate handed him over to be crucified. And now with this, I invite any of your comments or suggestions or questions. Yes, Michael.
My first impression is the muscularity of it and the energy. You know, it looks almost like it's in motion. Mm-hmm. So it's a static sculpture, but it has a lot of movement in it, and it's very believable. And I think those straining muscles add that. It's due to that. You know, it's very dynamic.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you know, I mean, I'm thinking of the size of a tusk, but how they make that large a figure from ivory. Like, can you kind of warm it or combine different tusks together?
Yep. So that's a very good question, and I can show you. I have a couple of images, and this one is the best. So, and this helps. We can talk about the musculature as well. Exactly. So a tusk has just a defined circumference and just so much material that you can use. And so that's why this work is particularly interesting. There is a report that one tusk, which is around 73 pounds, costs like 100 of times of a salary of a working man. So first of all, they're very expensive. So to create a sculpture or a figure that's that tall, So you really, I mean, you're using a whole tusk for that one sculpture. And then in addition, I think what happened, because it's round and it's a conical form, so it becomes slenderer. So I think what he had to do and what he did, for example, here on the arm, you can see, so he did the main figure because it's quite straight out of one piece. But then to create the arm, you can see there's like a cut right here. So he probably carved that out of a separate piece of ivory or a separate section out of that particular tusk and then added it to it. So I think the main figures is one piece, but then kind of the arm or something that was then added from a different part. Yeah. And I think we can see there's a cut maybe here on the arm as well. And yes, so Michael was saying the musculature, and I think that's why he is very highly rated and honestly got such a high price in the auction. The detail is magnificent in this carving. Yeah.
One of the things that I look at their faces and just not even thinking about the art, but thinking about what's going on in their heads and how they can be, are they cruel? Are they feeling bad that they're doing this? But their faces kind of look like they might be enjoying it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's just, ugh.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, they're very angry almost. They're very aggressive. There's true violence that's being expressed in this moment. And I would like to point out here, we can see the hand of this person reaching out to the hair of Christ, and he's pulling back his hair and his head. So it's really full of violence and hatred and punishment.
I'm trying to figure out, I don't think these are Roman soldiers based on their garments. And I'm trying to remember historically if it was Pilate's personal guards or the Jewish portion of his people that were responsible for the flagellation, maybe somebody else here. They don't look like Roman figures. Usually the ones that I've seen have a...
Sorry, what did you say? There.
They're partially disrobed because they're working so hard. They're working up a sweat. So they wouldn't wear their armor to do this kind of thing.
But I think there are pictures that do show them in armor. The other thing is the cat o' nine tail-like things that they have. I'm told that based on some of the writings that they did not contain metallic materials on the ends, otherwise it would have torn his flesh even more.
Mm-hmm.
These are shown without metallic things, but rather interesting.
Yeah.
There are Roman accounts of flagellation where the person was actually disemboweled because they had metallic things on it that would tear the flesh. In a lot of Spanish sculptures or, like crucifixes and things like that, it's really gory. But they think part of the reason for that is because that kind of stuff was going on in Spain up to pretty late, and so people really knew it was involved.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a pretty awful thing, and a lot of people didn't survive the flagellation.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some, I've seen it postulated that perhaps the reason that Christ died on the cross so fast was because his flagellation was particularly awful.
Mm-hmm.
So he bled out a lot and was just shocky going up on the cross. So.
Yeah. And yes.
I was just going to ask the question about, the other great sculptor, Michelangelo. When was he born?
So he died in 1576.
So this is like 50 to 100 years earlier.
Correct, yeah. So
Okay.
yes, Michelangelo was before him.
For him.
Yep.
Okay. But it reminds me of the quality of Michelangelo.
Right,
Totally.
yes.
And yet Michelangelo is pietà, which is calm and serene. And this is just anger just flowing out of every muscle in these men's
Mhm.
body. And so, are those really ivory? Or is that really rope?
Oh no, so the rope, that's rope.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so yeah, he
Okay.
did add then the rope as a rope.
It's not original. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So no, yeah, the ropes, I think that's just, yeah, a rope material. Yes, yeah. Oh yeah, I think that's why, and I'm quoting Dr. Schmidt here, that there's no evidence that Ignatius went to Rome, but very much the same observation that you made, that his sculptures are very much based on kind of a Michelangelo type or Greek sculptures that had been excavated just 150 years before in Rome, and they were there. It was like the Laocoon sculpture is a Greek goddess that is fighting together with his son. We've seen it. Together with his sons, they're fighting serpents, and it's all this twisting and turning, and there's these wonderful muscle in its detail. And I think that's what made Dr. Schmidt believe that Ignatius probably had been to Rome to see it for himself, and then to be able to implement that into his own sculptures so vividly, actually. Yeah.
I just was going to comment. Rodin, had also massive sculptures, and with a grotesque kind of vision,
Facial expressions, yeah.
expressions on the 12, whatever it was, 12 workers of.
Yeah. Yes.
And anyway, so it's just amazing how time.
Oh yeah, and artists again and again look back, and it's lovely to see that quite often there is a kind of a cycle. A particular type of art is in vogue, and then it kind of goes back a little bit or out of fashion, and then a new generation of artists will look back at the kind of the old works of art, and then take elements from that and then implement that into their art. So we kind of see an up and down of particular styles coming back and elements of that. Yes, and we can just. So again, this is, I wanted to show just a couple of different views, because that's the beauty of a sculpture. So when you walk around it, you get different views of what's going on, and you can appreciate the details. Again, with this particular sculptor, very much so. I mean, all these wonderful details, the toes and the foot, and yeah, the twisting and turning of the bodies is so realistic, so real, and so tangible, I think. In particular, if we really think it's quite tall. I mean, so it really touches someone if you stand in front of this. Very moving. No, unfortunately not. So just a kind of the background history I mentioned. So it was in Chile, in Santiago, since the earliest evidence is really since the 17th century, so really close to, and it has always been in that family, and just came to the market in 2016. So until then, it was always has been in the family. And the family it was a Spanish nobleman who had been sent to Chile when the Spanish started to conquer Chile, South America. And then one of his uncles was actually a Jesuit priest, and then they believed that there might have been a connection, and that the Jesuit priest might have brought over this particular sculpture and introduced it into the family. So they, on the auction catalog, they have some original photographs where the sculpture is in the kind of the reception room of that family. So it's been, and that's beautiful too with the particular work of art. It's so old, but you can really know where it was and which family it was with. I did, because Sotheby's only says it's sold. So, and they didn't, sometimes if it goes to a museum, they will announce it, or the museum itself will announce it, that they bought this particular work of art. I didn't see anything, so my assumption is that it might have gone back into a private collection, yes. So, yeah. Okay, so yeah, our reflection on the flagellation of Christ leads us to the observation, actually, that violence begs more violence, and which leaves us with the question, do we reject violence as a solution to human problems? Our second painting tonight is The Procession to Calvary by Peter Bruegel the Elder, created in 1564. And again, you can follow along on the handout. Peter Bruegel the Elder was born around 1525 to 1530 in Breda in the Low Countries. There's no birth certificate known from him, so there's a guess. Early in his life, Bruegel moved to Antwerp, one of the most vibrant commercial cities in Northern Europe at the time, as well as the center of publishing in the Netherlands. Later, Bruegel spent time in Rome and other cities in Italy, but eventually moved to Brussels in 1562-1563 and died there in 1569. Peter Bruegel the Elder was the greatest of a large, important southern Flemish family of artists, active over 4 generations in the 16th and the 17th centuries. Many significant works of art by his children, Peter Bruegel the Younger and Jan Bruegel the Elder, as well as his grandchildren, maintained the long continuous impact of the Bruegel family in Flemish art. A number of Peter Bruegel's paintings focus on the lives of commoners, which earned him the nickname Peasant Bruegel. However, he was firmly connected to the wealthy and powerful. His works demonstrate an attentive eye for detail and attests to his direct observation of village settings. However, they are far from simple recreations of everyday life. The powerful compositions, brilliantly organized and controlled, reflect a sophisticated artistic design. The ongoing interest and debate over the interpretations of Bruegel's peasant images over the last more than 450 years underscore the complexity and originality of his conceptions. Peter Bruegel created conversation pieces, leading viewers like us today to study his paintings and decipher the meaning of his work, and that at the same time learn something about ourselves. His oeuvre consists of 45 paintings, of which 29 are still in existence, and 65 drawings. For this painting, I would like to quote from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 23, verse 27. A great number of the people followed him, and among them were women who were beating their breasts and wailing for him. And with this one, the beauty of it has been digitalized. And so once we kind of maybe established a little bit of a general overview of the painting and know what we're looking at, because it kind of seems like chaos. But once I can open the link, the hyperlink, and we can kind of zoom into it, and it's quite interesting to see the amazing details that Bruegel put into this painting. So maybe just I like to do this. So in the dead center of this painting, we will see there is Jesus under the weight. He has fallen under the weight of the cross. And I will zoom into this, and we're going to see that in detail. And then one thing I would like to point out before I get, it's just look at these horsemen with their red jackets. And as I have mentioned before, they help us to read the painting from left to the right, because they lead your eye from all the way from the left over to the right, over here to Golgotha. So that and wherever there's red, usually there's something happening as well. So we can go into that. So let me use this hyperlink. And I'm just doing this, but isn't that amazing? I mean, so this is 1 centimeter, and every person in this painting has a facial expression, and everyone is different. I mean, it's unbelievable, and there are hundreds of people in this painting. It's quite remarkable.
The whole painting is only 4 feet long. It's not very big.
Oh no, it's not. Yeah, and so I mean, every horse, every animal. I just wanted to go to this. And this is a little bit tricky on this computer. There you go. I'm sorry. Just bear with me for a second. There you are. So can you see that? Yeah. So there is Christ under the cross. Anything? I don't want to talk all the time. So I think this depiction is quite close to the truth in some way. I mean, it's not. It's obviously it's set in the Dutch landscape, and all these people wearing Dutch contemporary dresses. But the notion that it was there were many people, and the involvement of the people was on a different degree. I mean, we will later see also how Mary and Mary Magdalene, how they are depicted in the painting. But there's a lot of people kind of taking part in it. And some are involved, and some go about their own way, and some are not even interested what's going on at all. We have some people that are pulling the cross along. Like this chap, he's actually standing on the cross. So it's the fascination with Bruegel's paintings, if one kind of likes this type of painting, is it depicts every one of us in some sense. We are all our faults and all our interests or disinterests, all the works of life are depicted in these paintings. So that's Christ under the cross, and then it's quite interesting over here. Over here. So these are the 2 bandits, and they didn't have to carry their cross. So in Bruegel's painting, they are in this wooden cart, pulled by a horse. And so this person, I mean, they're obviously, they're ash-faced. They know what's coming. They're scared. Again, just an amazing detail. I don't. This thief. He's actually holding a cross. And someone was saying it's kind of interesting. The cross is a sign of suffering, but it's also for us. It's a sign of hope, something we can hold on to.
That's a monk handing him the cross. That's a clergyman.
Excuse me?
It's a Franciscan.
Oh,
That's
yes,
a clergyman. Yeah, that's
so
a.
one
it's
is
a monk.
One
Yeah.
is a Franciscan.
Or a
Which
friar.
one is it? The right or the left? Is this a Franciscan?
The gray one would be the
Yeah.
Franciscan.
And I think that's a Dominican.
Dominican, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
can't see the habit, but we can see
Yes.
the
Yeah.
cloak,
Absolutely. I think they-
mantle.
So, yes.
I'm just wondering, like, which of the bandits, was saved, essentially. I'm wondering if the one on the left was the one who was saved, because now he's holding the cross, like if that's like a premonition or something in that painting.
Could be. I mean, those things are open for discussion. And I say there are conversation pieces, and there's no manual comes with it that Bruegel said, okay, I was thinking about exactly this when I painted this one. So they are open for some room of personal interpretation. Yeah, but yeah, that you could think that. Yes, yeah. And there's so much in this, and another group I would like to come to is up here. So this is the Virgin Mary, with Mary Magdalene, and again, so Bruegel just gave her a red cloak, just again to kind of draw our eye to that within the painting. John the Evangelist, and the second Mary here, and I think you can see that on your handout. That group it's kind of on the right hand side and the front, and they're almost like slightly like a little separate painting implanted into the main painting. They're larger in size, and they're also, if you look at their dress, they're very elegantly dressed and quite different. And then here, just in the background, are the women that was mentioned, that Luke mentioned in his. Yes, the women from Jerusalem. So one is weeping and one is holding up her hands. We can see here on the edge, this woman, she's clasping her hands. So they are one of the few that are actually really looking at Christ in this painting. Again, if you look at if a chance and spend some time on the painting, you will see there's a lot of people not actually looking at Christ carrying the cross. There's a lot of going on. There's a lot of distraction. So yeah, and then the last thing, again, we could spend a lot of time on this. Is then if we go over and we follow the horseman and go up to the upper right-hand side. And just so the Netherlands were under the rule of the Spanish during that time, and so that's why we see the horsemen all wearing red coats. Those are the soldiers, the Spanish soldiers. And here, already a large group of spectators have assembled around where the site of the crucifixion is happening, and the 2 crosses for the thieves are already up. And we can see one of the soldiers has taken off his coat, and that's again is kind of the red that marks the spot, is digging the hole for Christ's cross as he brings it in. Yeah, so a lot happening in this painting.
Yeah, one thing it really brings out, from historical accounts, public executions were events.
Mm-hmm.
People turned out in large numbers, and A Tale of Two Cities from Dickens' novel, the public beheadings in France, and a lot of people showed up just to see it, but also it was just people were just there because it was an event, and there were people that were walking around selling snacks and things like that. A real historically, that's the truth, and you kind of get a sense of that this is just a big event.
Right.
Some of the people aren't really focused on Jesus or the thieves or anything like that. They're just because it's a public event that checking it out,
Right.
being part of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. And that's what happened. And I think if we now go back to the biblical reading, there was a large crowd, right? That because Pilate actually tried to get out of it. He tried to get out of crucifying Christ 3 times, and he came out every time. And I think that's why it's so important, the flagellation. It was very gruesome, and many times, as you mentioned, people wouldn't survive it. He came out and he said, I don't find any fault. I'm just flagellating, and then let him go. And then people would say, no. And so he tried it 3 times, and the crowd would get louder and louder, demanding Christ's crucifixion. And so I think there's 2 points. So in the biblical report, we know that there was a large crowd, and they probably also showed up for the crucifixion. And they were roused up by the Pharisees to ask for Christ's crucifixion. And then also, yes, I agree. I wrote it many times. It was a public event, and it was something people would come along to for.
People were talking to Christ while he was on the cross. They were taunting him and asking him questions and saying, "Well, if you're the Son of God, why don't you?" Just all kinds of. So it was. Apparently people could get pretty close too. They weren't, at a great distance or anything. They were right up there with him.
Yeah. Yes.
Humankind has not changed much in whatever the date was when the Pope came to Iowa.
79.
Thank you. I went down on a bus and with, 40 of my closest friends, and through the crowd, you have the Hare Krishnas moving around quietly, selling food and whatever else they were, but huge crowd, and people were milling around.
Yes. Oh yeah. Nothing has changed since the Bible has been written. we see that again and again. That's for sure.
I have a question. What is the thing that has the tall post, and it looks like a bird is on it, and something else is hanging?
I might.
And then there's one way in the background too.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah.
You see the edge.
Yeah.
Those were torture devices. It's called breaking wheel. That's what the term is. So they're heavy cartwheels, and they were often lined with metal, and they were used to torture murderers and bandits. And I read up on it. So they would use them either bottom to top or top to bottom, and then would drop them on the people that were convicted to break their bones. And then afterwards they would tie them on top of these wheels and put them on these large wooden poles, and left to die and left to be eaten off from the birds. Yeah.
And there's a number of poles to the left of. And what are those?
And I don't know if I have that in here, but
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
you can see it on your Yeah. So yeah, there were all of these
All
torture
over.
reels.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
The detail in that is fantastic. I mean, it's just incredible, the detail. How long would it take for an artist, would you know, to paint something like this with all these people and all this detail?
Mhm.
How long would it take someone, do you know?
I don't have an exact answer, but probably months.
1 month, yeah.
Yeah,
would
for these
imagine,
details. And they
yes.
would use magnifying glasses when they were painting to paint the details
Yeah.
and the faces and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm glad this created so much interest. However, we have to finish with this painting, and I leave you with the question that I came up with is, do I think for myself, or do I follow the crowd demonizing other human beings? The third and last work of art of this evening is the painting The Crucified Christ by the Flemish Baroque artist Peter Paul Rubens. Rubens was born in 1577 in Siegen, it's a German province in Westphalia, to where his part Calvinist Flemish family had fled to escape religious persecution in Antwerp. In 1578, they moved to Cologne, which is my home city, where the artist lived until his return to Antwerp in 1589. By then, Rubens and his mother had reconverted to Catholicism, and he remained a fervent believer until his death of gout at the age of 63 in 1614. Rubens was a classically educated humanist scholar, and later in life also became a diplomat. He was knighted by both King Philip IV of Spain and King Charles I of England. Rubens was admitted to the Painters Guild in Antwerp in 1598. From 1600 until 1608, Rubens lived in Italy, intensively studying both the art of Greek and Roman antiquity and the great masters of the Renaissance. During this period, he also received commission to create altarpieces, paintings for churches, and portraits of the nobility. After his return, Rubens facilitated one of the most important artistic workshops in Antwerp. Rubens' unique and immensely popular Baroque style emphasized movement, color, and grandeur, which followed the immediate dramatic artistic style promoted in the Counter-Reformation. And during our Lenten series in 2022 and just last year, we reflected on Rubens' paintings, the elevation of the cross and the descent from the cross, respectively. Both of these paintings are altarpieces completed by Rubens for the Cathedral of Our Lady in Antwerp. Overall, more than 1,400 works have been attributed to him. For this work of art, I would like to quote from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 23, verses 45 and 46. While the sun's light faded, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." And when he said this, he breathed his last. So, this is our last painting for the evening. And I invite your comments, yes?
I was going to comment on the darkness in the back there. And if you go back to the previous painting, kind of the darkness that's coming, I thought that was interesting kind of premonition of what's to come.
Yes, yeah, thank you, exactly, because that's right. So in the Peter Bruegel painting, there is just a little bit of a dark cloud just hanging right in the edge. And now the darkness has set in this particular painting, that's right.
So I had shown you this evening, our niece just did a project where she projected Christ on the cross with all of the wounds in like a medical way. But what interested me, she did a lot of research, and she had read somewhere that they would often crucify with the feet each on one side of the cross and then nailed through, and I've never seen any depiction that way. It's always been just the one nail through. I wondered if you'd ever come across anything about that?
Yes, because you showed me that, and I saw that Christ's feet were kind of on the side, and I have to say I've never seen that.
Yeah.
So usually on paintings, Michael has something to say. So usually we see it that way, but
They've actually found, a tarsal bone that's penetrated by a nail with a block of wood kind of on the outside of it, and it goes, sideways through the tarsal bone, and so they have actual archaeological evidence of how at least that individual was crucified.
okay.
And it kind of makes sense if you think about it. Physically, it would be a lot easier to nail somebody's heel to the sides of the cross rather than crossing them in front, like, you know what I mean? I mean, once you get the guy up on the pole, you're kind of wrestling with his feet, and
Right.
It would be a lot easier to have one guy hold one to the side and the other one hammer a nail in. I mean, it's gross to think about, but it's practical. And so
Right.
there is some evidence that that's actually how the crucifixions were done. But they don't know if that's how all of them were done. They just know that that's how one example that
Right.
would be contemporaneous. And I think it was in Judea. In England? Oh, really? Oh.
Okay.
During the Roman period, though. Okay.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, no, that is an interesting detail. But yeah, in most of the paintings you will see the feet either even on cross of each other or kind of side by side to each other. Yeah. It just kind of moved in. And it took me a long time to choose the painting for tonight. There's so many crucifixions out there. The reason I was attracted to this one, I like the hope in it. And it's, in this one, Christ is still alive. He's actually looking up, and there seems to be kind of a direct contact between him and the Father. I felt that when the head is up, his eyes are raised to the heavens. And he's almost a little bit, he's fighting it. His hands are clenched. His muscles are tight. He tries to stay alive as long as possible. He's fighting the good fight for us. But I thought it's quite different to see. Sometimes, depending what moment the artist chooses, it's either just before Christ dies or it's after he has died, and then obviously the head would be down. But I think it's the composition is extremely powerful and moving and the way it is.
So just above Jesus' head, I can make out Jesus of Nazareth.
Right. Yeah.
It should say King of the Jews, I think they say.
Yeah. So in the Gospel of John, we hear that Pilate asked to have a sign written that said Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews, and in 3 different languages. So it's Hebrew, Latin, and in Greek. And Rubens kind of imitated that right on there. Yes. Yeah. So unfortunately, we had to cut this short a little bit. I just would like to make one comment. Last week, we looked at images of Christ, and we commented on Christ being rather gaunt and very slender. And even though I hadn't chosen this, I mentioned that if we would look at the picture by Peter Paul Rubens, Christ's physique would look quite different, and it is true. So again, it depends on which time period the work of art was created, what was kind of, again, what was the fashion, and what art the artist had looked back onto. So Rubens definitely, since he had spent 7 years in Italy, he for sure had seen works by Michelangelo and works by Titian. And then also it was a very Flemish style during the Baroque time to depict the human body of quite flashy and full of musculature. So it was a kind of a interesting contrast. But again, that's the beauty of art history as we go through it. And that's why I like to put up these time scales at the beginning, because it does help us to interpret the works of art as we see them, depending on which time period they fall into, kind of what we can expect to see in that particular work of art. Okay, and so I thank you very much again for coming, and I will close this reflection with the question, do we trust the Father to see us through our own challenges? And thank you very much for coming again.